Coming up on this week's show, the new Games Master has been revealed.
The GTA Trilogy remaster is almost here.
And we chat Microsoft Gaming and Motocross Madness with Robb Rinard.
The Retro Hour podcast is brought to you each week with our wonderful friends at Bitmap Books. Now, if you thought the Mac wasn't a gaming platform, check out their brand new book that's available from today, October 29th, The Secret History of Mac Gaming, covering some incredible franchises that started on the Mac, Missed Halo, SimCity, to name but a few. At 480 pages long, this book is a must-read for all fans of retro gaming. You can check that out and their entire book range on their website at bitmapbooks.co.uk. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 299, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And welcome to this week's podcast, a show that takes you behind the scenes on the good old days of video games, covering some incredible computers and consoles, the games that we grew up playing, the people that made them, the companies as well. And I'm thinking of some of the companies that we've covered on this show, like, Activision, Ocean Software, Atari. Name some software companies, Joe.
Bloody hell, every time. You always put me on the spot. Software.
You knew that was coming,
God.
surely.
Well, I don't want to name a load that we've not had, but like... Konami,
Come on, Ocean.
Capcom, Ocean, Psygnosis, Team 17, Rare, Nintendo, I mean, there you go. Is that all right? Did I pass? Am I still on the Retro Hour?
We've talked about all those companies in great detail over the last 6 years or so that we've been doing this show, but I mean... 299 episodes, lads. I just want to say, next week is going to be the big 300. It is mind-blowing that we've done so many of these.
Oh, totally. And I think, we do cover the good days of video games, but we also cover the bad days of video games. Yeah. So we talk about all of the different aspects of video games. And, 299, we've nearly done 300 interviews, and we've covered so much in that. You're completely right.
Well, we have got, obviously, a bit of a monumental show coming up that we are going to be doing this weekend, actually, on Sunday evening, the Retro Hour's 300th episode, which is going to be a little bit different because we've kind of teased it over the last few weeks, but we're actually going to be doing as live show. So we're going to be streaming the show live to our patrons so they can tune in and watch us recording it live. We're all going to get together for the first time in over 18 months in studio, do the show in person, and we're going to be joined by some amazing guests. Really, this weekend is just going to be a pure celebration, and we're going to use it just to have a bit of a giggle, I think, aren't we?
Yeah, it's going to be fun because, we do this audio and we're going to release a video to everybody, and you're going to be able to see, us actually in the flesh. And we haven't really been around in the flesh altogether. Of course, it's not just flesh. We need to wear some clothes and stuff. But
no flesh on me.
I was going to say, where's he going with this?
You want to tune in and watch the Flesh Fest this weekend?
We've not been around in a studio together for pretty much 2 years, is it?
My concern, but this is also my work for me, because I'm very nervous about doing it live to the patrons. And obviously, it's going to come out to the regular people as well. It's not like episode 300 exclusive to the patrons. Yeah. It's just they will get the live footage. One, I'm worried about that. Two, we've got 3 amazing guests joining us. So there's going to be 6 of us on the show, which is mind-blowing. And then also, Dan's wife has texted us all saying that she's going to do a little party beforehand to celebrate episode 300, which is lovely.
Are you saying you're nervous about my wife's cooking?
No, I'm worried about getting drunk or something.
You're just going to eat a load and fall asleep.
Yeah, I'm just going to be sat in the corner holding my belly full of sausage rolls.
I mean, I'm really excited for it. We've got a lot of work to do between now and then. I've got to get all the equipment set up. We're going to test everything. We haven't done video before, so whether my internet bandwidth in this new studio will actually cope, we'll see. But we're going to be joined by, like you said, 3 incredible guests. So... should we announce who they are? Oh,
totally.
Well, this one's a really big one for me. And I can't believe we've had him on the show before. I can't believe we've had him on the show 262 episodes ago. And I thought it was 100 episodes ago. We're going to be having Clint, a.k.a. LGR, on, which I think is absolutely awesome. I absolutely loved interviewing him, and he was well up for it when we asked him. So Clint is going to be joining us, which is awesome.
Yeah, I can't believe we had him. What was it, episode
38. So if my
That
maths
is
is right,
insane,
262 odd, something like that. Like when you were like, oh yeah, when did we have him on? I was like, oh yeah, like episode 100. Like, yeah, a long time ago.
So that's going to be incredible. We're also going to be joined by Kim Justice as well. Now, obviously, we're all fans of Kim's channel. I think, she does some of the absolutely best documentaries on YouTube. It's one of those channels I can put on and I can just like literally, I think I'll watch one video. Before you know it, I've had a channel on that all night.
Well, testament to her as well. She's writing to all the magazines at the moment. Well, she's not writing to them. She's writing for them.
I was going to say, what's he on about writing to them?
yeah, she's writing for them. So there's some fantastic articles coming out from Kim as well. So that huge knowledge of gaming there.
And a very good friend of the show, Dimitri's from Modern Vintage Gamer, who we only had on about a month ago. But, we told him we're doing this for episode 300. He really wanted to get involved in it. And we know how much we all love Dimitri's. He's always got so much value on the show and people love hearing from him as well. And I think it's just going to be a load of fun having those three incredible content creators on the show too, to chat about, some retro gaming stories, to chat about a few subjects for an hour or so. It's going to be great fun. And also, if you are a patron and you want to watch it live, we're going to be doing it on Sunday evening. That'll be Halloween, October 31st. Not tempting fate or anything, are we? And you can watch it actually. I'll put the YouTube unlisted link in there. See the show getting done as live. And also, we want you guys to get involved as well. So there's going to be more details in our Patreon. And of course, like you said, the show's going to be released to everybody else as usual the following Friday. And there will be a special video version of it as soon as I can get it edited and providing it actually records properly, fingers crossed. But that is going to be this weekend, the Retro Hours 300th episode. We'd love you to join us for it. And it's going to be open to all patron supporters. I mean, you can get it from, I think, what's our lowest one? Like $3 a month? Less than a cup of coffee. Yeah, it's less than a cup of coffee. And you can support the show and get involved in it. And all the details are at theretrohour.com. I did mention this weekend on Sunday, it is going to be Halloween.
And the worst thing about Halloween is that I'm going to a Halloween party just before the 300th. I'm going to be absolutely hungover and probably still dressed. So
we're just going to have Exorcist music. We'll just have the Exorcist music as like Ravi walks in like with mist behind him hungover.
Turning white with my head spinning around.
Turning white, yeah.
I love your Halloween makeup, Ravi. What do you mean I'm not wearing Halloween makeup? I'm always this pasty. But yeah, I mean, we always like to chat about, Halloween games that we're going to be playing as well. I don't know if you guys, obviously we're doing the show on Sunday, but I'm thinking, cause Ravi's out partying. Maybe you play them on Friday, Ravi. But I've already got mine selected for this Halloween. And this is one that's to me is a tradition that I play every year on Halloween. I've got Jack in the Dark downloaded and ready to play on my old 486, which was a special Halloween version of Alone in the Dark that came out in 1993.
Yeah, man. You play that every year. Every year, we do a post on Instagram, like, what have we all been playing? And like every time it's like Alone in the Dark kind of thing.
That to me, though, it's got the best atmosphere of any retro game for Halloween. And I'm going to play, I've got Ghosts and Goblins as well to play, which, another great, obviously, awesome Halloween themed game.
Awesome game.
What about you? You got anything lined up? I know you're a big Halloween fan.
I usually just crack on with Resident Evil, and I've been playing, I mentioned it on the After Hours show this week, I've been playing through Symphony of the Night. Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which, I actually forget Castlevania are horror games. Like, they're meant to be like, you're fighting vampires and werewolves and stuff like that. But I never really associate them as like scary games just because they're 2D platformers and stuff. So what I might play is a game that actually really scared me when I played it when I was younger. A game called Cold Fear for the PlayStation 2, which is essentially a Resident Evil 4 clone, where over-the-shoulder shooter, but it's set on a ship, like an oil rig, and it's been taken over by zombies, and you like have to get headshots and stuff. And I played it. I borrowed it off a friend, like 15 years ago, and was terribly scared of it and terrible at the game. And obviously, I've since have picked it up in my own collection, and I've not played it since then. So I think I might crack out the PS2 and play that.
It's from Darkworks. I see you did Alone in the Dark, New Nightmare.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, nice.
There you go.
Well, one that I've always wondered about has been Splatterhouse, because I used to buy these like American comics and get them on import, and in the back it would always be adverts for Splatterhouse. So I need to actually check that game out. It's one I've never really discovered. I'm sure Joe is familiar with that one.
I am very familiar with Splatterhouse. I love Splatterhouse. I've got some funny stories about that, but I won't go off on one telling you about my childhood memories of Splatterhouse, but really good game. I hope you enjoy it, Ravi. Yeah,
that was very much, it looked like a rip-off of the Halloween movies, didn't it?
Rip-off of, like, just, any horror film, really. There's so many references in there. And in the first game, the mask that you wear is literally just the Friday the 13th mask. But then by the second and third game, they like changed it a little bit, so it wasn't so like obvious. But yeah, really fun game.
And that game's got the best sound effects. You know, you splat things on the wall.
Yeah,
and everything.
like proper like.
So you'll enjoy that, Ravi. Be brave. Get it downloaded. So we have got an incredible guest as well coming up on the podcast in around 20 minutes from now before we get into the news stories. And this week, I mean, God, Motocross Madness, what a series.
Oh, yeah, this is a fantastic game. And, you know, we chat with Robb Rinard, and he's the main man with Motocross Madness. You know, I love these titles. They came just at a period when Microsoft were kind of trying to change their identity and get into that whole gaming world with the Sidewinder pads. Do you remember those?
Yeah, it was very much like a prototype, almost Xbox controller, wasn't it, a couple of years before?
Yeah, and Motocross Madness was actually packaged with them at one point, but it also arrived when like Pentiums were really popular and lots of 3D acceleration was coming out, and it was a really cool game. It was my first like free roam experience, and we chat to Rob about the whole development of it, the ATV series as well, his kind of history and stuff like, you know, really fascinating stuff like how they did the audio, which you know, you don't think about audio really that much in those games, but then people were getting different kind of sound systems. 4.1 was coming out, you know, it was really important.
Yeah, I love the stunt mode in it as well. That was always loads of fun.
Oh, yeah, and, you know, you'd go to the very edge of the map and it would just fire you like a cannon across the whole map.
Yeah, I mean, an incredible game. And it's great to get into that kind of, you know, that late 90s, early 2000s PC era as well, which, like you mentioned then, I mean, it was kind of around the time when every 6 months or so, a new graphics card came onto the market and new games would take advantage of it. And, you know, it wasn't a cheap time to be a PC gamer, but they were really pushing the boundaries with things they could do with 3D acceleration.
Yeah, and it was like pre-Xbox, but they were trying to get that kind of gaming vibe on the PC and trying to, you know, unify it all with the same controller, and had some mad stuff like, I don't know if you remember the force feedback stuff that you could get. So you could get like a vest that you would put on and it would have like kicks and punches like you were being hit. And when you crashed your motorbike, your motocrosser in there, you know, you could feel like you were actually falling over or getting hit in your own living room.
On the handlebars.
Yeah, so really hyped for this week's guest. Robb Rinard is going to be joining us very soon. But first, a lot of news stories to talk about this week, guys. Let's jump straight into it, though, because, I mean, it seems like every other week at the moment. There is news about the Games Master comeback, of course, the probably the most famous British gaming TV show from back in the 90s that is finally coming back after over 20 years off our screens. We've talked about the new location. We've talked about the new hosts of the show. The big question is, who is going to be the Games Master? Because in the original series, it was Sir Patrick Moore, who was best known for shows like The Sky at Night. You know, he's an astronomer, very respected, but then unusually did this, you know, kids and teenagers TV show all about gaming quite randomly.
Well, I think the Games Master has always had to be someone who's completely clueless about video games, is kind of pronunciated and has a bit of a little playful fun element with them, but is totally removed from the world of video games. And they've just made a new choice of a presenter. And I think for our international listeners, we need to explain who he is. But this is a Sir Trevor McDonald, and he's basically a British newsreader. So he used to do like the news at 10, which was the main news in the UK. But then he did a lot of fun things. What are your guys' memories of Trevor McDonald?
I just remember him being the leading news reporter for for Britain, for the UK. Like, yeah, he did like the main Channel 3 ITV news. But am I correct in thinking, did he do like children's TV in the 80s or something?
Yeah, so there's this show called Tiz Was, and Lenny Henry's a famous comedian, and he had a character called Trevor McDonald, who was basically a Mickey take of Trevor McDonald. But then they actually got him in to the studio, and the whole thing about Tiz was they'd like throw water over you, they'd throw pies, and they'd gun you and stuff, and he had to sit and present the news really sternly in the middle of like all this water getting chucked everywhere and absolute chaos. So that showed his kind of like fun side, you know. So it's wicked that he's up for this, and he's 82 years old as well. So,
but what about this for things that he's done throughout his career that you wouldn't expect? Did you know he performed live on stage in Hyde Park with The Who in 1996.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
And of course, he's done Have I Got News for You on TV, did a special edition of Countdown. So he's not beyond having a bit of fun, even though, and I think the reason this works so well, so I've got to say, I think we all unanimously agreed he's a fantastic choice to be the new Games Master, because the Games Master needs that gravitas, doesn't he?
Yeah, and it needs that kind of, you know, stern kind of British, I'm going to tell you off as well, like, you petulant child. And I can imagine him, kind of doing that as well. He's definitely got that vibe.
And I think as well, I mean, we've talked about, obviously, the show's been filmed already, but I imagine everybody was there, probably had to sign NDAs or something, so I've not seen much about it on social media.
I don't know. I feel like they probably hadn't cast him at that point. I could be completely wrong, and I feel like they're just going to kind of like slot him in between, maybe. I don't know. Like, I wonder what they would do, unless they just had like, you know, a fill-in, just like reading to the contestants.
It's interesting because I've seen like pretty much, we put out like, what do you think of this choice on Twitter? And I think pretty much universally, everybody was like, this is genius. And he's kind of like a guy that you wouldn't have thought of originally, but now it's been suggested. Everybody's like, oh my God. And, you know, I know people were saying Patrick Stewart and Brian Blessed, who, bless him, he's like 90 years old now. So, I think it's a really good choice, Trevor MD.
Well, you know, Robert Florence is going to be the main host of it as well, who we all agreed, another great choice in the Scottish comedian. So I don't know about you guys, man. I don't want to tempt fate too much, but this is looking pretty good, I've got to say.
Yeah, when it was first announced, I don't remember if we said it on the show. We may have just said it individually to each other, but we were all a bit like, might be a bit naff, but it seems like it's coming together quite nicely, so touch wood.
They're making some good choices on paper.
Yeah.
So hopefully it won't be too long until we get it. I'm hearing rumours that it's going to be November. It's going to be dropped on YouTube, so maybe only a couple of weeks to wait. Of course, we'll let you know our thoughts as soon as we see it. But if you want to read more about the what we know so far about the Games Master comeback, we'll link up that article in our show notes at theretrohour.com. Now, this is quite an interesting one. I mean, before we started recording, we were spending about 15 minutes on Wikipedia kind of learning the story of this, because it's something that none of us were actually familiar with. Now, this is a console that was apparently vaporware back in the early to mid-2000s, called the Phantom, that apparently now a prototype of it is going up on auction.
Yeah, this baffled me a little bit. So I've seen this a couple of places this week. So it's going up for auction on Friday, so the day this episode comes out. So on Friday the 29th of October, it'll be going up for auction for people obviously to bid on stuff. I don't think it's going to be quite as popular as like the Sony Nintendo, or whatever it's called, the Nintendo PlayStation.
The PlayStation, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be as popular as that. But yeah, Dan, you had to do some research to help me with this one. So
well, vaporware, kind of like now you've mentioned, the Nintendo PlayStation, which was seen as vaporware. Vaporware is kind of just like something that doesn't exist. That's
like hot air,
you know,
like
hyped, or it's like out there. And then people initially thought that was vaporware until they found that Nintendo PlayStation. You're right. It's the same with this Phantom. Like, people thought, oh, this doesn't exist, or there was a few versions or fake prototypes out there or something.
Yeah, so from what I understand, I'll give what I think it is, and then Dan can correct me or agree with me. They started making it in 2002, the company, which are now known as Phantom, funny enough, but they were called something different at the time. And essentially, they were branding it as like a online console, essentially for PC gaming, but like PC gaming made easier to kind of connect online and play against other gamers and stuff using it. And kind of more like a kind of console hub to get you online and stuff like that. And it was meant to come out in 2004, I believe. But there was no marketing for it. And it was like, I think it was at E3 once, and it was rumored that it was just a fake empty shell of a console. And then it just kind of slowly died. But apparently there was like no marketing for it whatsoever, which is why it kind of got listed as vaporware. But apparently the prototype does exist and is going up for sale.
Yeah, because it kind of reminds me, looking at the specs of it, it sounds like a PC.
Yeah.
That would have connected to the internet.
Like Windows XP, wasn't it?
Yeah, it must have been, for that era. And they're saying instead of discs and cartridges, it would have used direct download. So it really sounds like, a custom PC with like an Xbox Live kind of store, or Steam or something, like a custom version of that as a front end. So nothing that would have been beyond the realms of possibility. I mean, it doesn't sound too much of an advanced system, really. So I wonder why it never actually made it to market.
Well, the thing that I loved that you pointed out to me was, there's even a video of it on YouTube I've just watched, was that there was a few prototypes out there, and one was at QuakeCon 2004.
Oh, really?
And
Yeah.
it was smashed to bits in front of a live studio audience. And this guy's got a giant, like, Quake hammer.
Imagine if it sells on Friday for like $100,000 now, and they're just like, "Oh, we smashed it up."
Yeah, 2004, they were just like, right, let's just smash
Imagine if
this.
that guy buys it again and smashes this one.
Wouldn't surprise me if it was like John Romero or somebody.
But yeah, interesting device. And apparently this company, they actually make like gaming keyboards and that kind of thing today. I'm looking at that. Apparently they've only got 3 employees as of July 2007, it says. That was the last time I guess it was counted. So it doesn't look like a massive company. And I think that is something that we've often seen in, especially these kind of independent console companies, these very small teams who are trying to take on the big boys. Really, it's often a very difficult thing to do. So I'm not surprised it failed.
And it looks like a prototype. Like,
It's like a skybox.
It looks ugly.
Well, the description of it looks like your uncle's loony alarm clock.
Or fan heater or something.
Yeah, something like that. A Wi-Fi
Or George
box.
Foreman, yeah.
Yeah, they're saying here, so there was that one that was publicly destroyed at QuakeCon. The other one was spotted by a computer repair shop in Venice, Florida in 2015, which I guess that is probably the one that's up for sale. The one that hasn't been destroyed, obviously. So it'll be interesting to see how much it goes for. I mean, I'm really into video games and retro gaming. I'd never heard of this thing. So how much interest it'll be, I don't know whether I've just been out the loop or what. I don't remember hearing anything about this.
I hadn't heard of it
day.
either. So, and I chucked it in the news because I thought it'd be a good talking point. So we'll see. Maybe we can mention it in next week's show and see how much it went for.
Watch it go for like 10 million or something.
Yeah, something insane.
Yeah.
Guys at QuakeCon, no!
Yeah.
So we'll be keeping an eye on that one. Something else that we've been talking about over the last few months and is almost here, the GTA trilogy, these kind of remastered versions of the classic Grand Theft Auto games. That is now only a few weeks away, and we've seen a trailer, we've seen a few screenshots as well. They're calling this the Definitive Edition, coming out in mid-November for the current-gen consoles. And really the main thing is it's got some quite different-looking graphics that I've seen's had a bit of a mixed reaction online.
Yeah, I'm an elite from the GTA modding communities. When I saw the footage of this, I was like, they've copied a lot of stuff that the modders have done originally. So, like, high-end textures on the roads and stuff, especially with, like, rainy roads and the light reflections and stuff. People have been ramping up these games for a long time. And, it does look interesting, but it does look like it's just kind of a high-res reskinning. And to be honest, I think it's just a bit of a, like, little stopgap between GTA 6 just to keep people happy whilst they would have got a small team to kind of do this and just kind of redo it. But I don't know, it seems like it's going to be fun, and I guess it's not for me. It's for everybody who has memories of it and wants to play that. But to be honest, I'd play the original Vice City because I'm a purist when it comes to GTA.
What do you think of the look of it, Ravi? Like
it looks a bit cartoonish. They've kind of done a bit shadery, and they've kind of gone into the blocky stuff. But it looks like they haven't done much on the models. But interesting. But I wasn't a fan of like how San Andreas looked, to be honest.
You see, I think, like I said it before we started recording, and I don't know if you guys agree with me or whatever, but I think it's got like a real kind of like cartoony, you just said it there, cartoony look, but it's got like a real like Fortnite look to it. And I don't know if that's
the shader kind of look.
Yeah, I don't know if they're trying to kind of appeal that to, the modern age of gamers. Like, I don't want to say kids, but like young people, who are really into Fortnite and stuff like that.
Don't buy this for kids.
Yeah, don't buy this for kids. But like, I feel like that's what they're trying to appeal to, that kind of
one
market.
I'm really interested in seeing GTA 3, like seeing that properly, because that one, it never really looked amazingly good. It was always boxy.
Foggy.
And kind of square, and it had that blur effect all over the top of it and stuff. So it'd be nice to see that one in a bit more clarity, and especially when you had the whole gang wars and you were driving through and everyone was shooting at you and stuff. But it looks like fun and stuff, but it's interesting to see it's coming out on the PC as well, because I'm sure it's going to get even more modded to hell on top of that, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Well, it's coming out on pretty much everything. It's coming out on Xbox One, Xbox Series X, PS4, PS5, PC, and Switch. We're getting it digital on November 11th, and then we're getting it physical on all of those consoles. I thought we were just getting it for the Switch on the 7th of December, but it's coming out physical copies of the game on every single console and PC as well, which is really interesting. But apparently it's going to be quite big. Like, I'm not too sure, but it's going to be 25.4 gigabytes, which apparently is on the bigger end for Switch games.
Yeah, we
Switch,
used to get GTA in a rip for like 200 meg. For Vice City. Yeah.
And, you know, I'm reading the articles here and they're saying, you know, publishers don't often like to pay for the 32 gigabyte SD cards for the Switch. So, you know, there's rumors it might be a little bit more expensive on the Switch, but I don't think they will. But apparently it's going to be released and published by Nintendo. They're saying Nintendo have yet to confirm that, but Nintendo are going to be publishing and distributing it themselves, which I think is quite interesting because it's Grand Theft Auto. But they did, you know, and it's an adult game, but they did actually publish and distribute Dark Souls and Doom themselves. So it's not out of the realms of reality. Like,
yeah, it does kind of feel like Nintendo have moved on a bit from the days of, you know, no blood in Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, they're probably thinking like, actually, okay, you know, we're missing some money here, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
I think there is going to be big issues though, and the biggest issues are going to be the radios and the licensing of the music on there. It's not going to have all the original music on there. There will be definitely licenses.
Do we know that for sure?
I've not seen anything about that, and I've read. I don't want to say I'm the master here. I've read every single article. I've read like 3 articles on it, and none of them have mentioned the music. So that's actually a really good point there, Ravi.
Yeah, and also a lot of them are saying that the Confederate flag's also being removed from it as well, and all the kind of a lot of the references. So maybe there'll be some changes for more of the kind of modern time, and it might be a bit more censored because they were pretty risque games back then, weren't they?
Yeah, they were.
I mean, I get stuff like the flag, you know, it's obviously a different time now, but I think, you know, the music was such especially Vice City for me, that was 100%. Such an integral part of it. And I think, fair enough, the new graphics are different. Personally, I don't mind the look of it. First thing I thought when I saw them is it looked a bit like The Sims. But it's kind of got
good
that.
point, The Sims.
It's not, you know, I think it kind of looks like improved PS2 graphics, but obviously not to the quality of like a PS5 game. But I think that's all right because it's a retro game. And I probably don't want it to look too polished. I want it to kind of have that kind of retro kind of vibe to it. I think, you know, some of the backgrounds and the buildings look really good from these screenshots that we've seen so far.
You know what?
I think,
I'd love the voiceovers to be kind of cleaned up a little bit, and because there was some really good acting on that, like voice acting and stuff. I'd love to hear them in maybe a bit better quality, or they run it through AI or something.
Well, I think, you know, hopefully they're going to use the original. If, you know, they'll still have all that stuff, I imagine. You know, they can release it at a higher bit rate on the game. But yeah, I think the music to me is the thing that if they get that wrong, I think that's going to be the biggest backlash if the original soundtrack's not on there, because it's so important.
And also it seems that, like, I've just checked, and they seem to be removing versions of like GTA 3 and Vice City and San Andreas off the PlayStation Store at the moment. So they're removing the older versions and then putting in the newer one, which is
they don't want anyone buying it for like $9. I want you to pay.
Yeah.
For the new version.
Wait to pay $60 for the.
So do you think the value of the OG ones are going to go up then? Like,
I don't think so. They're so cheap. The original ones,
and they're absolutely everywhere.
They're everywhere. Yeah, I can't. I think some people might try it. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, look, original copy of GTA 3, like 50 quid. Whereas the reality of it is it's like a £4 game these days. So I think some people will try it, but I can't see it becoming expensive.
And I think you're right what you said, Ravi. You know, it's probably not for us, you know, guys that have got like a PS2 lying around and the original game. It's for people. I mean, I'm sure we're going to buy it as well.
Yeah.
It's actually probably crosses over both, really. But I think the main audience there is going to be people that had a PlayStation 2 and played the originals and probably haven't played them since.
Yeah, it's not going to be for me who's hacked it to run on the Wii U.
Yeah, you'll be the one they're taking down, right?
yeah, that's it, exactly.
So, I mean, again, it's a no-brainer, especially when I saw the physicals coming out on my birthday. I was like, okay, yeah, that's birthday present sorted. So, I'm excited for it. Just a good way to play an updated version.
Yeah, and I guess if they do release 6, you know, it's a build-up, go through the whole series, and then... you know, it gives them some time, and it also gets people, younger people invested in the older series and the whole kind of line of it, if there is any reference to the older stuff in the new one.
Yeah, I think, that's an interesting point. There are people probably, younger people who probably look at the old games and they probably look a bit too janky for them to take seriously now, but this might, they'll want to play them, but they'll play them like this. I think these games are going to sell incredibly well. Anyway, I'm sure they're going to have a number one hit on their hands with these. So, look forward to the release of that. Not long to wait now. Now, before we get into our interview this week, of course, stories about Motocross Madness with our guest this week, Robb Rinard. He's coming up in just a minute. It's time to talk about this, a new TV show. And it seems like there's been lots of kind of game-inspired television shows that have been coming along recently. This one, a television version of the classic space horror System Shock is coming.
Yeah, this is interesting. So, interestingly enough, the rights to this have been bought by Binge, who we actually mentioned on the show a couple of weeks ago they've bought the rights to the Driver TV show, like to Drive.
Right, yeah.
So I feel like this company Binge, they're like apparently like an Australian Netflix, like, you can't just get it in Australia, you can get it like other places and stuff. But like they seem to be buying like the rights to like, this is the second one we've seen now. So I won't be surprised if we see them buying the rights to more kind of classic IPs to make into TV shows. But yeah, System Shock, a live-action TV series. Now, I'm not too familiar with System Shock, and for some reason, I felt like Ravi was like a really big fan of it. But I've got it mixed up somewhere down the line. But
it's one that passed me by, because it was before Half-Life and BioShock, wasn't it? It was one of the early.
It was like Doom era, wasn't it?
Yeah. 94 System Shock.
Yeah, and I think there was a remake, and we covered that. But yeah, it really passed me by, System Shock. But I hear it is a cult classic.
Yeah, so it's set in the year 2072, and it's a rogue AI causing chaos and making killer cyborgs and killer mutants. So it sounds right up my street, especially for like a TV show as well. And we can be expecting it just in some time in 2022, apparently. But like, we've not really spoke about them, but like there's the, because it's not retro, but there's like the Last of Us TV show being made at the moment, which is like got big Hollywood actors in it and stuff like that. So, maybe with all these like games which were flops for Hollywood that got made into films, they're looking at TV shows now. Maybe
don't forget like your Mario movie as well.
Yeah, Mario movie's coming as well, isn't it? Like we've not really spoke about that much, but it just seems like a lot of these like Netflix and stuff. There's a Netflix Resident Evil show coming out. There's a Resident Evil film reboot coming out next month, but like Netflix are doing a TV show as well. So it's just, I feel like a lot of these studios are trying their kind of jumping back into like the video game scene, but they're like, let's do some TV shows with it instead, because the films can't do it justice in like an hour and a half or 2 hours because we've got these massive games. So they want to put it on the screen for 6 hours or 8 hours. Maybe that's what they're trying to do. Or maybe they're just trying to make quick money. Who knows?
I'm waiting for the Bubsy TV
series. Coming to you from Binge in 2022.
I can't imagine that franchise is
Rise of the Robots.
Yeah. Bubsy versus Rise of the Robots.
Actually, I think Rise of the Robots would make a really good TV series. The story behind that, this futuristic robot.
There's a story.
Kind of
There's a story in Rise of the Robots.
If you've sat through those cutscenes, Joe, which is the only impressive bit of that game, there's actually, I think it could be a Terminator-esque kind of thing.
With a Brian May soundtrack.
Yeah, 2 seconds of it, whatever it was. But yeah, that is very interesting. Apparently the new version of this game, we talked about the System Shock remake, apparently it was due out this summer, but it's been delayed.
Oh, okay.
They're saying it is still going to be out at some point this year. Maybe they're tying it so it's kind of, a promotional vehicle for the games.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Which would make sense, I guess. But yeah, it's always interesting, especially kind of niche stuff like that. So it does kind of feel like the main things have kind of been done to death now. So it is interesting that they're digging down these more, specialist franchises and games to develop into TV series. So I don't know about you guys. I'm looking at this thing like, I've never played that game before. I'd like to give it a try now.
Yeah, I want to give it a try now. Maybe that can be my Halloween game instead.
So if you want to read more about that, I'll put it in our show notes, and everything else we talked about this week, you'll find it all in your podcast app or on our website at theretrohour.com. Now let's give a huge thank you to the people that keep this podcast going week in, week out. And of course, this is our wonderful patrons who will be able to watch episode 300 of the Retro Hour podcast live this weekend.
Ooh. on Halloween. Ooh.
Now, of course, we do have Patreon for several reasons. I mean, we mention it every week, but really it is so important, for this show. And I think at the time recording this, we're up to 251 patrons now, which is just amazing. But of course, there is always room for lots more as well. If you want to get involved in this, not only can you watch episode 300 live this weekend and get involved in it too, you also get access to our monthly patrons only podcast. The most recent one we recorded last week, actually, it's out now. We went back to the year 1998, and that was loads of fun.
Yeah, there was a surprising amount for us to talk about. I was a little bit worried about it, but you and Ravi just started making loads of notes on it pre-show. I usually wing it, but yeah, there was so many big releases and big things that happened in 98, but I always just go straight to console, but you guys, you go outside well, for me, it feels like going outside the box, but you guys talk about Windows and everything like that.
It all blends into one usually, but then when we actually pick the years, it helps me sort my memories out. I'm that happened.
That's why we do it, to piece Ravi's life together. So you can check that out as well. The latest episode is available now. You also get the usual podcast early most weeks. You get it ad-free as well. You get extra content in there. We've done 2 extra stories for our patrons this week. And also, you get access to the monthly hangouts as well. Now, these are always so much fun.
Oh, yeah, they're great fun. Somebody described it as sitting around a kind of pub table and us all chatting. And that's what it feels like. It's just like a giant kind of pub. And there's quite a few people having a drink on there and just having a chat. And it's just really nice fun. And, people get their consoles out and they kind of... their systems, any problems, they help each other, but then also any suggestions or any kind of memories that come up. And it does last quite a long while. We go into late at night, don't we? It's good fun.
Yeah, good for us.
And also supporting the show. You help us, keep independent, because we're literally free dudes just doing this, and we're all doing this from our homes, and it's just absolutely fantastic. The support that you guys give us.
Yeah, and you've got us to episode 300, so we've got to say a huge thank you. And let's give a shout to some of our wonderful patrons this week. A big hello to James Greenhorn,
Mark Cave Allen,
Klaus Lindgren,
Phil Goodson,
and Jonathan Harrington,
who all backed us on Patreon. We really appreciate your support. And if you'd like to do the same, we'll see you this weekend for episode 300. You'll find it on our website right now at theretrohour.com. Now, just before we get into this week's special guest, Robb Rinard, talking about Rainbow Studios, those incredible Motocross Madness games, let's give a big thank you to this week's sponsor, our wonderful friends at Retro Gamer magazine. Now, we've said it before, if you enjoy our podcast, you need to be reading Retro Gamer.
Before I was doing the Retro Hour, I was reading Retro Gamer. It's such an awesome magazine, and, it comes from the legendary Future Publishing as well, and I've been following them since I was a kid, really.
Got the Amiga Format, Amiga Power. I used to read from them as well. Superplay, they used to do back in the day too. Legendary British publishing house, and they do Retro Gamer every month. And actually, I'm looking through the current issue right now. The cover feature is about the Evercade VS, the Evercade Versus, which I know we've been really excited about. We did an entire episode about that, didn't we? This is now the couch gaming version of the Evercade, where you can have 2 players on there and play a load of classic arcade games.
Yeah, the Evercade seems really cool. It's actually bringing kind of carts back, and you're getting the games picked for you, and it's really awesome to see these kind of new developments in the retro world.
I love the fact that they're bringing back couch gaming as well, so there's a whole feature on that. They're also talking about Command & Conquer Red Alert 2. There's a big feature on that.
One of my favourite titles.
Yeah, they've got the Super Nintendo. Quick look back at the SNS 101 revision of the Super Nintendo. They got really in depth on that. Talking about how Aladdin on the Master System was really impressive. They've got a feature all about gaming on the BBC Master. Talking about DMA design in the N64 years as well. So, there's so much in here. Mr. Biffo and Ian Lee do monthly features as well that are really interesting, their columns. Mr. Biffo has played The Secret of Monkey Island for the first time. It kind of gives his thoughts on that as well. So it is an essential read, and there is also a lovely tribute to Sir Clive Sinclair. So if you don't read Retro Gamer already, you really need to. Or if you just find it from the supermarket, why don't you subscribe instead? Make sure you get it every month. You get it early, actually. And also, you will get this fantastic Retrobit controller. Now, there's actually a couple that you can pick from here. You could have a free N64 tribute or a Mega Drive Bluetooth controller. Now, if you've been playing the classic games on the Switch and you've got N64 and Mega Drive games on there, works with the Switch. You can also use it on Windows, Mac, Raspberry Pi, iOS as well. And also the Tribute 64 controller actually has a classic N64 port, so you can use it on your original system as well. So perfect to get some retro gaming in throughout the autumn and winter this year. And if you'd like to get hold of 6 months of Retro Gamer magazine and also get this special gift completely free, support the podcast by using our link, magazinesdirect.com/retropod. That's 6 months of Retro Gamer with a retro controller absolutely free at magazinesdirect.com/retropod. And a huge thank you to our friends at Retro Gamer for their support of our show. Right, next, it's time to get some incredible stories on the development of games like Motocross Madness 1 and 2, inside Rainbow Studios, Microsoft's gaming division in the late 90s, early 2000s, with our special guest, Robb Rinard, is next on the Retro Hour podcast. You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and it is time for the main event, then our favourite part of the show, where we welcome on a very special guest. And today, getting some incredible stories of, Rainbow Studios, extreme sports games, Motocross Madness, of course, we're going to talk lots about as well. Let's welcome on our special guest this week, the wonderful Robb Rinard. Hello, Robb.
Good afternoon, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Great to have you on the show. Now, before we get into the stories of these incredible games that you've worked on through your career so far, I mean, we always like to kind of wind things back to day one and find out, how things started for you. I mean, do you remember what initially got you into video games and where it all began?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, so, like my first computer was a Heathkit H89, which meant it came in a bunch of boxes and you had to put it together. And so I spent days assembling it. So before I wrote any code, I knew what a CPU and RAM and the motherboard was and the video connector. So I was like, well, okay, this is great, but how do I make it do something? Like, it's a big doorstop. So one of the first games I worked on making was Snake, just, the little text-based game where you drive the snake around and eat the X's on the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly Zork. Zork was a big influence on me early on. And then down at our company headquarters, we had a mainframe that had that original Star Trek game on it. I think it was like an IBM System 34 or something like that, but it had the original text-based Star Trek game on it. And I was just fascinated by it, utterly fascinated.
And yeah, so were you kind of constructing that yourself then? And was it a bit of an expensive bit of kit, and were you worried that you'd kind of wreck it?
Well, so I lived on an airport, and we had an avionics department in there, and those guys were building them repeatedly. And I sat around bugging everybody, and at some point they finally said, here, just be quiet and put this together. So I think they did it more just to get me to quit bugging them than anything. But yeah, those were like, I don't know, almost $2,000 computers for back, and this would be what, 1981? It came with a whole bunch of early Microsoft products. So I had all these gray binders of BASIC, COBOL, Assembly. Oh, and what was their pre-Excel spreadsheet called? Was it Multiplan?
Oh,
they had a spreadsheet.
Now you put me on the spot.
Yeah, they had a spreadsheet that predated Excel. Oh, and then that database. Boy, what was that database called? Some crazy early database. So anyway, I had binders of all that. So I ended up learning BASIC, C, COBOL, and assembly language right out of the gate, just because those were all the stuff that came with the computer.
And what kind of stuff were you programming then? What programs were you making?
Well, I spent almost a year with my buddy Lamar, and we were big fans of Zork. So we made a text processor or parser and created what we called the ultimate adventure game. And it was just, we had diagrams mapped out all over the walls and whatnot. And yeah, it was just a text-based, move the rug, open the trap door, descend down the stairs, stuff like that. So it was pretty much a ripoff of Zork, but we were all consumed with it for a good solid year.
Text adventure is a pretty hardcore game to jump in early on, because I remember trying to make one as a kid and, not factoring in just all the sheer decisions, that the user can make and having to pass all that language. It's, very complicated, really, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I remember we took a trip across the country and I sat in the backseat of the car with a notebook, and it was about 4 days out and 4 days back. And in that 8 days, I filled the notebook with design sketches and floor plans and everything that was in my head, and then it took us a year to bring it to life. But all the kids at the school, it was really part of what made me realize that I could entertain people, because I brought it in on a floppy, I gave it to some kids, and I'm like, oh, here it is, whatever, I don't know, I have no idea. And then I come in the computer room the next day, and every single computer in the entire lab, the kids were playing it. And I'm like, oh, wow, I'm onto something here. I can entertain people.
Did you end up kind of distributing it like for sale at all, or
nope,
anything like that?
I didn't. I was pretty consumed with aviation back then. I said I lived on an airport. And really at that time, aviation was my life and computers were my hobby. So, I spent quite a bit of time flying every day.
Well, when did that change then? When did you decide to join the industry and make a go of it?
Yeah, so when I left Douglas, Arizona, which is a place nobody wants to go, it's down on the border, and came to Phoenix, went to a year of college. And I remember in my second semester, I spoke to my guidance counselor, and I said, this is just not working for me. You guys are teaching me the past, and I want to learn the future. It was all VAXs and mainframes and accounting relating programming, which was 90% of the world's computer programming jobs in 85, 86. So that made sense. But I'll never forget, I went into him and I said, I want to learn the future, like pixels. And he looked at me and he goes, what's a pixel? And I knew in that moment that college was not for me. It just wasn't going to lead to where I wanted to go. So, like most disappointments, I quit. And delivered pizzas for 2 years while I sat in my crappy little apartment. And I bought this big hardback book called Principles of Computer Graphics. And it was like a $70 book even back then. I bought it, couldn't understand it, and returned it. About 8 months later, I bought it a second time, kind of understood it, returned it. A year later, I bought it, and I actually got it. Like I understood the math at that point, and viewing frustrums and projections and the basics of a 3D rendering engine and all that. And it was starting to click. So that's about the time I heard of 3D Studio and, Autodesk's, not 3ds Max, but 3ds DOS. And I sought out the Arizona distributor of Autodesk products. His name was Mike Davis. And he introduced me to a gentleman named Earl Jared, who was the founder of Rainbow Studios. And I'll never forget, I walked in that office and there were 2 copies of those purple boxes of the documentation sitting up on the shelf. And Earl didn't know it, but I mean, I would have paid him for the chance to work there. Learning that software and learning 3D Studio was everything I wanted in life at that point. So that was the start, meeting Earl, coming in. And they were not a video game company. Rainbow Studios, it was called Rainbow Multimedia Group. And it was an animation. We did animations and logos and stuff like that for big companies. And we did vertical market applications. Like we did a history of technology thing for Pioneer that they ran in their corporate headquarters. And we did some elevator project for another company, but it had nothing to do with video games. But I told Earl, I said, I really appreciate the opportunity to work here, but the destiny of my life is to make video games, and I'm either going to do it here or do it somewhere else. And Earl, much to his credit, said, what do you need? And I said, I need a math genius. I go, I'm good at math, but I'm not a math genius. And he went out and found Mark DeSimone, who is a brilliant mathematician and programmer. And that was the start of heading down the path of making games. We met Kelly Flock from Sony. He came out and met all the guys and basically greenlit Air Havoc and greenlit the Hive all in one sit down. He had a movie, and they had this robot movie they wanted us to make a game of, but Rebel Assault had just come out, the Star Wars Rebel Assault, like the first CD-ROM streaming game. And we just wouldn't shut up about it. We're like, Rebel Assault's amazing. My God, Rebel Assault. And Kelly, Kelly was, I don't know if you guys knew Kelly Flock, great guy, huge figure in the industry. He just said, screw it, forget the robot game. Let's make a Rebel Assault game. And of course that became the Hive.
Well, let's just go back a bit, because like when you joined Rainbow, I guess it was all MS-DOS machines as well. And was that the kind of area that you guys were aiming for? And there was a whole flight simulator scene as well. Was that something that really interested you?
Oh, absolutely. I played Bruce Artwick's Flight Sim. Man, I played it originally on the TRS-80 when it was just white pixels on a black screen, and you were hard pressed to tell what you were looking at. But yeah, utterly fascinated by that from day one. The stuff we were doing there on the DOS machines, it was all Quick Basic and Quick C, 3DS, DOS. We all had these Targa cards for putting for displaying stuff, for high-res graphics. And then of course Autodesk Animator, the 2D Autodesk Animator. We used that for first few years doing just tons of stuff.
And I assume that was kind of really before like big 3D acceleration. So like Air Havoc control, like from what I've seen for it, it had some really impressive 3D models. And, this was on like Windows 3.1. So was this really quite hard to achieve, especially with people having like massively varied different setups?
Yeah, so we licensed all the 3D models from Viewpoint, and all of the videos, I think they were Cinepack compressed videos, which is like the world's worst compression, but that's all we had back in the day.
Yeah, I remember Cinepack, yeah.
It was that, or was it AV1, like Microsoft Video 1 or something like that? It was just utterly terrible. So yeah, all the videos were compressed using Cinepack. So basically it would play on any computer that had a CD-ROM. Interestingly enough, I love telling people this. Everybody says it's impossible to create a retail distributed game produced in Visual Basic, but Air Havoc was written top to bottom in Visual Basic.
And that was kind of a game where you're an air traffic controller, and you've got loads of people flying into the zone, and you've got to kind of move planes around. Planes can crash and stuff like that. Did you take a lot of experience from your kind of flight history and knowing about that? And add it to the game.
Like everything else, it's a matter of simplifying it, right? From air traffic control to driving a motocross bike, it's about delivering the fantasy. If what you were trying to deliver actually reflected reality, nobody could drive the bike, and almost nobody could, navigate all the planes. It's fairly sophisticated. So, I think one of the gifts that for whatever reason I have is an ability to take a complex subject matter and simplify it down to a core in a way that a broad base of people will find fun. And nobody taught me that. It's just something I seem to be able to do. So if I can work with really talented physics programmers, Rick Baltman and our terrain engine and engine maker, Mark DeSimone, pair me up with those guys and, we can work magic.
And yeah, some of those games were like massively complex. I remember Elite, and I don't think I could even get the thing off the ground. So, you're right about simplicity there. You mentioned Rebel Assault as well. Like that was an amazingly impressive title. Kind of having those 3D models, over the top of a video and stuff like that. Was that the first time you kind of seen that technology?
Yeah, we were blown away by it. Like I say, we wouldn't shut up talking to Kelly about it. Yeah, he had the foresight to let us follow our passion. And we spent, about 20 months working on the Hive. It was about a 15-person effort. And our first real, because I kind of made Air Havoc by myself. Like I certainly had help. There was a handful of the artists that helped me push through stuff. But the Hive was our first real team effort that we had to create the engine. Mark did this great stuff where we had panoramas, and you could be in a full 360 panorama, and it had exit points where if you looked the camera at the correct angle, it would then seamlessly pop into a video where you could leave the panorama and stream somewhere else. And, that was the early days of that. Not to mention that, the Hive shipped on DirectX 1. If I'm not mistaken, the Hive was the very first DirectX game ever to ship. While we were late in development, the DX guys would send us source code of DirectX, and we would send them source of the Hive, and we'd both cross-compile it. And they were testing out some of our stuff, and we were testing out some of their stuff. Yeah, as far as I know, the Hive was the very first DirectX 1.0 game to ship.
And that got ported later onto the PlayStation as well, didn't it?
Yeah, the PlayStation, and we kind of started on PlayStation 2. Now, one of our programmers, Glenn O'Bannon, he ported the Hive over to PS1. But as a team, we didn't. ATV Offroad Fury was our first PS2 title, and it was a launch title, I believe, in the fall of 2000. But when it showed up, it was a bunch of circuit boards wired inside a purple SGI Iris with about 5,000 pages of documentation in Japanese.
Wow.
And I mean, what are we even supposed to do with it? So we had one Japanese programmer, Hiro, great guy, and he did his best to help us translate the documentation. But I'll never forget, about 3 months into working on it, Travis paged everybody, come to Travis's office, come to Travis's office. We all run down there, and he rasterized a triangle. So he actually got the thing to draw a single triangle on the screen, and we were all standing around high-fiving each other and whatnot. So that's how hard it was not having final hardware or any documentation in English, just to get the thing to do something.
Well, let's talk about Motocross Madness. I mean, everyone's going to be, really interested to hear these stories, Rob. And obviously, a couple of years before that game, Road Rash, I remember being a massive series. I mean, was there any influence from Road Rash when you were designing Motocross Madness?
Yeah, I was a big fan of Road Rash. I played it to death, but it really didn't bear any influence on the design. So the way MCM came about was a close friend of mine named Travis Riffle. He handed me a videotape called Crusty Demons of Dirt. And in fact, MCM1 was called Project Krusty with a K inside Microsoft. This was some of the early motocross guys out jumping in the dunes and doing insane stuff. And the early freestyle guys, this was before anybody had the courage to try to backflip a motorcycle. But we watched it. And actually, you know what? I should back up a tick before that. So 2 years before that, I would not shut up to the guys at Rainbow. I said, look, we have to make a skateboard game. Skateboard is it's just awesome, and it's begging to be done right. There was an Atari stand-up arcade game called, was it Skate 360? I think I'm getting the name wrong. But it had this off-axis joystick you could spin and a button. It was made by the same guys that made Paperboy.
720, I think it was called.
720. Yeah, 720, exactly. Not Skate 360. So, 720 was my inspiration, man. We loved that game. And they actually told me to be quiet. After 2 years of just not shutting up about we got to make a skateboard game, they're like, be quiet. We went to E3, and what did we see at E3 that year? Tony Hawk 1.0. And, it was instantly massive. And so I think that fueled a little bit the notion that, this extreme sports thing is actually a thing. So when I showed everybody the Crusty Demons of Dirt video, everybody agreed it was cool, but then coupled with the success of Tony Hawk, I think that pushed everyone into a position where they felt like this could become a something. So, that got us started. And at that same time, Mark DeSimone had been developing our terrain engine. It had a funny name. We called it Aardvark, Advanced Animation Research Development at Rainbow. The K is silent. So we were just in the middle of developing this terrain engine that would allow you to go somewhat great distances. And when I say great distances, I mean a mile. But for back then, a mile was like a big deal. And so, Glenn O'Bannon got assigned being the physics programmer, and he and I started working on getting a bike to drive on Mark's new terrain engine. And again, like you guys said, it was the very earliest video cards, Voodoo 3D effects cards. That was the state of the art, the very, very first 3D cards ever to hit the market. They were so weak, we couldn't even afford to draw trees. So if you remember, MCM1 was just a barren landscape, no trees whatsoever.
And do you think, obviously that around that time, 1998, like you mentioned, that was kind of when people were starting to get 3D accelerated cards. Do you think Motocross Madness was actually a bit of an instigator for people upgrading their machines and to play the game?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, we sold quite a few million copies of it. Coupled with that tilt controller that Microsoft came up with, that really drove sales as well. And I know late in the life cycle of MCM1, they bundled that tilt controller with the game. And I remember it selling quite a few copies.
Well, like you mentioned there, it was that kind of voxel landscape, and it was pretty bare as well. I remember Magic Carpet was another one like that. And you're right about the 3D accelerator. It also came at the time of the Pentiums. Was the Pentium a kind of big change, and specifically programming for that?
Yeah, it was. I remember the voxel game that we were really impressed by was Comanche. We played the snot out of that game. Magic Carpet was really cool, but as far as time spent with the joystick, Comanche, and what was that other one? Oh, Apache, Interactive Magic's Apache. Not the EA Apache, but Interactive Magic Apache. Man, we played that game to death too. That was right around the same time as Motocross Madness 1.
Well, the thing I loved about it was, for me, it was the first kind of experience where I could just drive anywhere. It was like total freedom. You weren't set on a track. Some levels you were, and you were going around, but there were different modes. And did this kind of become a big selling point, the fact that you could just go anywhere and totally, make it your own game?
Yeah, at that time, kids had just not really ever played a game that gave you the freedom to go that far. And of course, we ran into the game design dilemma. What happens when you get to the edge of the world? We had so many arguments about it. It was a fence or this hand of God that kind of flicks you back and stuff. And I wanted to do the cannonball, but basically the management at Rainbow was summarily opposed to it. But late one Friday night, I just walked down to Glenn's office. I handed him a sound effect. I said, Glenn, when we get to the perimeter, just give the bike and the rider two different, ever so slightly different vector, smacks, and then fire off this sound effect with it. We did it, showed it to everybody on Monday, and it was kind of a mixed response. Some people liked it, some people loved it, but then kids came in, and it became the landmark feature of the game. Young kids would climb that hill. And it's kind of a battle to get up the hill in the first place.
Yeah.
So they would battle and hill climb to get up there, and then your reward is to get shot halfway around the world. And I've seen kids do it 20 times in a row and just giggle themselves silly.
It's such a good feature, and that whole series and even into ATV and stuff. It's like that feature remained, and it's just so much fun. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, for as well as it was received, there's no way we could take it out. We'd get crucified if we did.
I've played some games, GTA Online, and people find glitching sections like on the swings where they can fire themselves across a map in exactly that style. And it's just, really, really good fun, that is.
Well, obviously, Motocross Madness was published by Microsoft. How did they get involved then? And did they see this as like a new range of software, particularly with Windows 98 kind of coming out around the same time? Did they want to have these kind of cool, sporty titles?
Yeah, so, our relationship with Microsoft started with the Hive because of our close ties with the DX team. So that kind of got us in with them. Mark's Aardvark terrain engine was really revolutionary for its time. We probably had it running end of 96, early 97. And Microsoft took wind of that. There was talk of Microsoft buying Rainbow at that time, but I think we ended up signing a 3-game deal for the first of which was Microsoft Deadly Tide, which was another streaming panorama-based game, not a sequel to the Hive, but the evolution of the technology with a completely new story. Tony Stutterheim and Bruce Hall came in. They were some of Steven Spielberg's guys at Amblin Imaging. They came in, designed this whole underwater world, and Rainbow was actually pushing to raise the funding to make a Blue Planet CGI movie at the same time. So Deadly Tide was kind of meant to be a precursor to the Blue Planet movie, but we just never got the funding. We were trying to get, $50 or $60 million, which is quite an endeavor. But so we made Deadly Tide. Microsoft had signed a 3-game deal with us. Deadly Tide didn't do so well. I think they canceled the whole thing. But then we maintained close ties with them when we were showing them what we were up to. But then when we showed them the Motocross Madness demo, they were really into it. And of course they saw the success of Tony Hawk, and they had their own Madness series, right? Monster Truck Madness had come out in 97, I think. Could have even been 96, because I think they had a software rasterized version of Monster Truck Madness before hardware came out.
Yeah, it was 96. Yeah, I've just looked.
Yeah, and it was on the it was huge on the N64, like just absolutely huge. So, that gave them an appetite for, more madness, and Motocross fell into that.
And I guess it was like Microsoft trying to define themselves after the flight simulators as well. You mentioned like the Sidewinder freestyle controller there. Do you think that was them trying to kind of unify the gaming standards to kind of become a gaming platform, like long before the Xbox?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the Sidewinder controller, that the whole series, those are some of my favorite controllers. Yeah, we used those for a long time. Certainly the very first force feedback controller from Microsoft, that was just an excellent controller. And, there's this demo that they had that nobody remembers and I can't ever find. It was a string and a ball, and you could bounce the ball on this string using the force feedback controller. And it was the best example of force feedback I'd ever seen, still to this day. And I can't find the demo to save my life.
Well, the sound effects were obviously a big part of the game as well. How were they made, and were they taken from real recordings?
Yeah, so I'm a bit of a audiophile. I'm crazy for good sound in the car, in the house, on the desktop, wherever. And it really frustrated me that there never seemed to be somebody with great passion for developing the audio. So I just decided to do it myself. I knew nothing about it, but I started researching and learning, recording techniques and whatnot. So what we came up with, and again, thanks to Stefan Roncata, the pro rider, and a few of his friends, we went out in the desert, found a flat section, took a 100-foot piece of rope, and then I stood in the middle, and they walked out a big circle around me. And they were like shuffling their feet going along so we could clearly see where the circle was. And then we laid out orange pylon cones to make a perfect circle. And then I stood in the middle with the parabolic dish like you see at football games.
Yeah.
And the guys would ride clockwise around me so that the tailpipe would point kind of inwards towards me. And we just developed a series of, like I would have them go from a start and go first, second gear, stop, first, second gear, stop. And then we'd do then 25 times we'd do second, third, fourth gear, second, third, fourth gear. We'd do that for 20 minutes. And as soon as I'd destroy one rider, he's getting so tired he couldn't do it, we'd fire up the next rider. And we did the 125s, the two-stroke 250s, the four-stroke 400s. And we were out there 5 days probably with guys driving in circles around me. But and then I just came back and cut it up and found ways to hook the samples together. The nice thing about motocross bikes, unlike like a Forza car on a road track, the back tire on a motocross bike is shaking all over the place. So the engine's going like it's not just accelerating smoothly. So in that context, you can cleverly cut stuff up so that you create categories of sound and then a simple state engine to make it sequence sounds within a category in a logical way. And then you have, decel sounds every time the bike leaves the ground, play one of several sounds as though you let go of the gas. And then the hardest part was actually making the revving in the air sounds. Revving in the air and holding it at red line and letting go, those were some of the hardest sounds to develop. That was a blast. Like going out and learning the foundations of field recording and doing that was the time of my life, learning about all that.
That attention to detail as well really helps because, I've played so many games where you get a stock engine sound and the experience doesn't feel right. And I think a lot of developers kind of overlook the importance of audio sometimes and they focus too much on the graphics. Yeah,
we have the old saying, right? Audio is 50% of the experience and 5% of the budget.
Yeah.
And it's sadly true. But, I kind of forced the audio experience in the games at Rainbow. And after the first few games where the audio was becoming, more highly regarded, it just kind of became an expectation. Some of our other guys, Dan Gallagher and Mark Stratford, audio guys that came in and took over the audio as we grew. They worked very hard to, maintain and improve that standard that was set with some of the early games.
And I guess that was one thing that was getting upgraded at the time as well. So people were going to like 4.1 kind of audio setup. So having, people approaching you at the side and being able to hear that from the different angles must have been really, really impressive.
The biggest advancements I ever did on the audio side actually came a number of years later. So Rick Baltman and I developed 5 generations of a physics-based audio system that connected the audio directly to the inputs and outputs of the physics engine. But later on, when we were doing trophy trucks and off-road buggies and stuff, I would actually use 16 mics. I'd have 8 mics up around the engine and 8 mics back by the pipe. The vehicle's engine itself was comprised of I called it an engine stack. So a collection of loops from idle all the way to red line for the engine, and a collection of loops from idle to red line for the tailpipe. As it drove towards you and came past you, you could clearly hear the difference from the engine sound coming at you to the pipe sound as it drove away from you. And then even when you got in and out of the throttle, I would vary the mix between the engine and the pipe, so that when you're in the throttle, you're getting engine, and when you dump the throttle, you get pipe. You kind of get that blowback sound during deceleration. So yeah, that stuff was a blast to develop. I think I ended up recording over 150 different race cars on the dyno.
Well, another aspect of it that was really huge and good fun back then were LAN games. Did you ever have any big Motocross Madness LAN parties?
Guys, it got out of control. We started doing Friday nights, so we could do eight players at a time in MCM. And Friday nights, folks started from around Phoenix, started showing up at the studio. And we'd race until 10 a.m. or noon on Saturday. I mean, there was a lot of smoking and drinking and playing going on for many, many hours. We'd get 2 or 3 groups of 8 people racing at once. And it got to where I had a friend, Roger, he owned a racetrack in New Mexico. He would drive 10 hours just to come over here and play. Wow. Guys drove in from LA. Some of Steph's friends and whatnot, they would come in from LA to play. And then Stephen Cameron, he ran a big Xbox gaming site. He lives in Canada. A couple times a year, he'd hop a flight and fly down to Phoenix just to hang out and race with us. So yes, we did a lot of it, and it got out of control.
Well, the ragdoll effects and the crashes, I mean, they were great fun in the game and, hilarious as well. I mean, was there a huge focus on getting them as kind of realistic as possible?
Yeah, at first we had no idea. We were focused on make the bike fun to drive, make a fun racing game, well-designed racetracks. But then all of a sudden, when we would crash, we found ourselves laughing hysterically when it was a particularly violent crash. So that just woke us up, and we watch kids play, and some of them, they would just crash the bike over and over and over. So yeah, that refocused our attention, and we spent a lot more time creating different presets of animation, so that we had like an over the handlebars animation, and over the left side, over the right side, we call it high siding, and then the come down straight too hard and just bottom out the suspension and go flying. So we ended up with like 6 different categories of animations, because it proved to be so incredibly entertaining. And we knew after that, we spent probably more time on the rider than we did on the bike.
Well, Motocross Madness 2, even though it was only 2 years later, it kind of felt like the industry, technology was moving really fast around that time. And obviously you had the improved graphics, you had trees and stuff in there as well. Over 40 tracks in that game too. It felt like a much more complete package. How did you improve the engine of the original game and take advantage of this, more powerful hardware that people had then?
Yeah, so as far as the ground goes, we were able to do multi-texture layers. So we had like a high resolution texture for the ground, and then we had a low resolution detail texture that tiled, that added a depth that made it look like the ground was just higher resolution everywhere. Certainly the trees and the ecosystem was a big deal. I think, and I'm kind of fuzzy on these numbers, Mark would probably yell at me, but I think we had upwards of 100,000 trees out there. So going from 0 to 100,000 was quite a number. Actually, I remember one day we were at Microsoft demoing it for Bill Gates. First, the Microsoft guys gave me a bet that I couldn't say shrubbery more than 5 times in the demo. So I kept pointing out the amazing shrubberies to Bill as we were driving. And here's a different style of shrubbery here for you to see. And then we were running a debug build, and in the debug build, the camera collision against the ground was shut off so that the artists could take the camera down below the ground and look up at things, because sometimes it helped you see errors that were hard to see from above the ground. And we're riding along, and Bill doesn't say a lot in the demos. He's just looking for something to nitpick. So we're driving along, and I like driving with the camera down real low, and I clipped the side of a hill, and it just for a split second, it went under the ground. He goes, "What was that?" And I go, "Oh." And I saw the Microsoft team just freak out. Like they were utterly terrified that Bill was going to light them up for something. Yeah, and I stopped. And I go, "Oh, actually, check this out. This is kind of cool." So I stopped and I put the camera completely under the ground and flew it around. And I'm like, well, from under the ground. So it would, when you're under the ground, the terrain shuts off because the normals all just face up. You can get a good idea of the density of all of our shrubbery that we have down here from below the ground. And then the Microsoft guys are back there laughing, and Bill's like, "Oh, that's cool. This is completely amazing." And you're like, "Yeah, thanks." And put the camera back up and took off. But there was like 1 second there that they thought that, "Oh no, this is the end of our career because Bill's about to drop the hammer on us."
Well, Tony Hawk's, they had an amazing soundtrack, and it kind of provided the extra level of cool. Like, you guys ended up having Incubus on Motocross Madness too. How did that deal happen? And did you ever meet them, and were they like into the game?
Yeah, they were super cool. I remember they did a concert up at Red Rocks in Colorado, and they had Motocross Madness footage running on big screens behind them the whole time while they were playing. Yeah, it was just, I was a big fan of Incubus at that time. It was kind of out of Microsoft's price range, but I pushed on them. I said, these guys they embody the attitude of this game, man. It goes hand in hand. So, if you can find the money, please try to get this for the title track. And they came through, God bless them. It worked really well.
Well, the level editor, Armadillo, that was really impressive. And I mean, I guess that added a lot of longevity to the game. I mean, where did that idea come from, and why did you want to implement that?
Yeah, so MCM1 actually had a tile-based track editor where I pre-created little tiles of up jump and flat jump and landing jump and all this stuff. And you could lay them out in a grid and make flat supercross tracks. So we were definitely thinking track editor in the first place. But then as the tools developed over that 4-year experience, I started work on Armadillo, and then my buddy Pete Reich, he came in and took over the project and finished it. But it was huge. I mean, we were so pleasantly surprised to see the adoption from the fans of thousands and thousands. I think at one point, the one website that had all the user tracks hosted, I think there was upwards of 15,000 tracks up there. Guys really went nuts with it, and it certainly added several years of longevity to the game. Now, the downside from a business perspective is, were I to do it today, I think the formula is you only put a track editor in the last version of your game. If you think you're going to make a sequel, you're really better off from a business point of view not putting that track editor out until you believe you're making the final version of the game, because people are just going to play it to death, and it will probably detract from the sales of your sequel.
Yeah, there was an amazing amount of user-created content. Like, those fan sites had tons of stuff, and people could create customized skins as well and stuff. And this was so early on. People were just downloading off simple websites and stuff. Did you think that really built a community around it as well?
Hugely so. Yeah, remember the precursor to Xbox Live was the Zone, and so there was just so much activity in there, folks talking about and exchanging ideas and jerseys and links to their sites and their new content. The early days of social media was super cool. What it's devolved into today, I don't really want much to do with, but the early days of social media were fun when it was just, I guess, more naive.
Well, obviously multiplayer was part of Motocross Madness too, via the MSN network, which was very ahead of its time. Stuff like leaderboards and tag game and custom number plates. It was a bit like a precursor to Xbox Live, I guess, in a way. What was it like implementing that?
It actually took some genius math. Motocross ran inside of a 2 kilobit bandwidth, the multiplayer stuff. They wanted us to run on less than 9600 baud modems very efficiently. And we actually got the bandwidth for all 8 bikes to fit inside of, and this is at like 30 hertz, to fit inside of 2K. And there was some very tricky math going on in there to make that work.
Well, another bit that I liked was, I hope I say this right, was the Baja races. And they were kind of like really huge, long ones. Were these based on real races then?
Not really. We just took the Supercross Worlds, and I'd drive around out there for a few hours until I found a big old loop that I thought was fun. Try to find some giant hills where you can actually catch some downsides off some huge jumps rather than just land flat or crash. And then we just laid out waypoint gates out there and set them up. But it did turn out to be quite fun. But in multiplayer, we had a lot of fun with those Baja races.
Well, ATV Offroad Fury was an amazing title as well. And obviously that was, PlayStation 2 had come along by then. How did the PS2 technology help with game creation then? And did it really improve things? And what do you think made that game stand out for PS2 users?
Well, ATV Offroad Fury is when a gentleman named Rick Baltman entered my life and all of our lives at Rainbow. Rick is an amazing guy. He's so humble and so talented. It's just ridiculous. One of the problems with really smart, really talented math-based programmers is they know they're better than you and me, and it's really hard to get them to do what you want. Like you have a vision for something, but they're just so smart and so stubborn that you just can't get out of them what you know the potential is because they have this chip on their shoulder. And that's the exact opposite of Rick. Rick came in and he and I sat down together. He rewrote the physics from scratch for ATV Offroad Fury. He is a physics guy. He came from he worked in the satellite industry, and then he also wrote a package called Real Motion, which folks like Industrial Light and Magic used for lots of their visual effects in movies. If everything blew up or had to break apart or had complex physics to it, that's in the early 90s, that was Rick. He was the guy behind all that. So our physics programmer on Motocross Madness, Glenn O'Bannon, and I love Glenn. He's one of my closest buddies. He's just a great guy, but he had no experience making physics, I don't believe, ever. So he came in and hit the books and started learning. But the physics in MCM are really clunky compared to the physics in ATV Offroad Fury. They're so butter smooth and just work so beautifully. It really made the driving experience go to the next level. That combined with, we're now in our 5th year of designing tracks, we were able to design premium tracks on a brand new platform that had huge mass appeal with some of the best driving physics you could hope for that time on that platform. Remember, this is 20 years ago now. So, and interestingly, Rick and I found over the years, his solutions became more sophisticated and our implementations became more rudimentary. Like the better we got at delivering retail physics that were really fun for everybody to play, under the hood, it was actually getting simpler and simpler. We can design super complex physics, but gosh, it's hard to drive, man. If I deliver realistic physics to you, it's just almost impossible to drive. But we really mastered delivering on the fantasy of riding like Jeremy McGrath or Ricky Carmichael, which was what the kids want, right? They can't ride like Jeremy or Ricky. If they could, they would, but they can't. So delivering on the fantasy in a way that they can approach it and relate to it, yeah, that's the magic. And that's what Rick gave us on Offroad Fury.
Well, ATV is obviously in the PlayStation's greatest hits collection. I mean, do you think that game maintained a lot of what made Motocross Madness great, but improved on them?
Absolutely. And that whole thing was an interesting experience too, because if you remember the head of Sony, he was going around at that time going, PlayStation 2 is the Matrix. It's like the Matrix in a box. You're going to be blown away. And the truth was the PS2 was a little bit more powerful than the PS1. But he had the whole world convinced that the PS2 was the Matrix in a box. And so we took Offroad Fury out to LA and we sat behind the mirrors and did the play testing. And I remember kids going like, what the hell is this? It wasn't HD. In fact, on PS2, it was like a 360 by 480 frame buffer, something like that, or 480 by 512 frame buffer. By today's standards, it's total crap. And I remember we got just horribly reviewed. So out of the playtest sessions that we did, Sony was convinced that we'd made a flop. And they actually had this fireworks game that they put all kinds of advertising behind because in their playtests, people just loved it. I think in the end, the fireworks game sold about 75,000 copies and Offroad Fury sold over 6 million.
Nice.
But it's certainly a good lesson of what people say in playtests versus just what they'll say in reality when they're by themselves playing.
And that also had like another fantastic metal soundtrack as well, with like Alice in Chains featuring and stuff. You really like went out and got a lot more bands and stuff on that.
Yeah, we had no idea at the time, right? Like, remember, Sony came in because Sony is also Sony Music, and so Sony America people just went to Sony Music and said, "Hey, what do you got for us?" And they had actually positioned a whole bunch of up and coming huge bands. and gave us those songs. We were listening to them at first, and I'm not much of a metal guy, but even the metal guys at Rainbow, they were like, what is this? I've never even heard of any of this. And I remember a bunch of sour faces. People were like, this is frustrating. But a year later, those were all mega bands. So, that certainly contributed to its success too, because the Sony Music guys knew what they were doing when picking those songs for sure.
And that series went on and on as well, didn't it, ATV? Like, really, really popular.
Yeah, I mean, I have in my closet somewhere a PlayStation 2 that came with a bundle of Offroad Fury in it. I remember telling the guys, I held it up in front of the team and I said, guys, this represents the pinnacle of the industry. There's nowhere to go up from here. We are the game bundled with the most successful console in the world. Savor this moment, because we're on top at this moment and there's literally nowhere to go. The best we could hope to do is maintain it. And man, I got chewed out for saying that like you can't possibly imagine. But it was true. We were never bundled with another console game as far as I know after that. So yeah, that was a really good time and a really good place with great memories. The whole team of guys that worked on that title. We had to work super hard because the PlayStation 2 was this mystery device that, honestly, we didn't even understand some of the most basic tech until Offroad Fury 2. This is a little techie, but things like using DMA buffers to transfer memory from one place to another. It does it asynchronously, and in Offroad Fury 1, we did it synchronously because we hadn't even figured out DMA buffers at that point. That's how hard it was to develop for that stupid platform. But by Offroad Fury 2, we were again able to put a bunch more features in because we were still learning about how to use the vector processors. Boy, I'm forgetting what all they were called. But they had all those parallel processors in there that were kind of weird. But once you got a handle on how to use them, you could actually do pretty cool stuff.
Well, were you involved? And what did you think of the Bongfish Motocross Madness release? I remember it was kind of like avatars and heads and stuff like that in 2013.
I saw it. I actually thought to myself, what has Microsoft done, man? If you're going to make another Motocross Madness, carry it on and make a serious game. And that game didn't come across to me as very serious. I would certainly love to have the opportunity to make another motocross game. That MX Unleashed was far and away the best game that Rick and I ever worked on together from a driving and gameplay point of view. So yeah, when I saw the MCM3 game that Microsoft put out, I was a little disappointed by it.
Yeah, I really I've seen a lot of video of people playing Motocross Madness in like 4K, 60 frames per second. Upscaling it and doing all of this, and I'd really love to see a new version one day because it's just such a classic.
Yep, we have no shortage of ideas.
Well, out of all the games you've worked on, this might be a hard question to answer, but which do you have the most fond memories of them? Which one have you got the most affection for?
Yeah, so as I was just alluding to, MX Unleashed, let's see, in 2003, THQ came in and bought Rainbow Studios, and then we were part of THQ up until their demise a few years later, and they immediately greenlit another motocross franchise. The 2 years that we worked on MX Unleashed, that team and that time and place and whatnot, that was far and away my favorite development experience. We were pretty much masters of what we were doing in our space at that time. Our tools and our tech were, 9 years into it. We had an opportunity to break away and do something completely brand new, using our basis of experience to implement it. And to this day, I still get guys on Facebook telling me that of all the motocross games ever, even the modern ones, that the first MXU is still their favorite game.
Yeah, it's got a great legacy behind it, and obviously, like you said, a massive community of fans behind the game too. What are you up to these days then, Rob?
Well, for the last few years, I have been working with a company. We're working on, it's kind of I won't say it's a secret project, but it's certainly not public. We are developing a new form of high-speed internet delivery. The tech that we're working on enables you to use the existing infrastructure that is already in place around the country, and I can deliver 2 gigabit down and 2 gigabit up for $50 a month. Oh, wow. And hopefully by spring or summer of 22, we're going to have it rolled out here in Arizona as a test base.
Well, if you need any beta testers in the UK, I'm always happy to help.
Yeah, so it's insanely fast, and I say it's both up and down, and we can do it cost effectively, and there's not an expensive infrastructure in order to make it work.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. Well, listen, Rob, it's been absolutely amazing to hear some of your stories. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us a bit of an insight into those incredible games that you worked on and sharing your memories. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks so much for having me on, guys. It was great talking to you.